We consider ourselves a violence reduction team. We work from the gospel mandate to not to repay evil with evil. There is enough evil going on in the West Bank and in the city of Hebron this week that there is no sense in repaying that. When the team first arrived, they were dismayed to find that they were in the midst of home demolitions. 3 Palestinian homes were blown up in quick succession, and there were families left just sitting on the rubble, homeless. The first one was blown up because a Palestinian gunman had been living in that house. The second one was blown up because a Palestinian gunman had been shot down within 500 meters of the house. And so there are people now left homeless, women left as widows and left with children homeless. And the Red Cross brings in tents, which they always do, and thank God for that, but you can't live the rest of your life in a tent with 5 or 6 children. In one of the schools where they go down the hill to the school, the border police, who are real tough fellas, come down towards the school, and the little girls run in crying and shrieking. And the little boys sometimes get feisty, and not the little boys probably, but the bigger ones, maybe 11 or 12, hide behind a building and pick up a rock. And that is the beginning of something, and then they'll begin to shoot tear gas. So we try very hard to stop the kids from picking up the rocks and throwing the stones. It's intervention to stop small events from happening and escalating into, because if the tear gas gets shot, one morning we didn't succeed in stopping the bigger boys from throwing the rocks. The tear gas got shot. The girls ran into school crying. The girls and boys go to school separately, so the boys go into their school, but then the tear gas is wafting around the playground, the play area. We can't let the children out. We had 2 people in the school. The soldiers come in and say, there's no school, school is closed, you all have to go home. And then we say, they may have to go home, but we have to wait now till this tear gas is clear. We're not going to send them home through clouds of tear gas, so we'll have to wait half an hour or as long as it takes. And they say they have to go home now, and we say no, they have to wait till you argue gently, just so eventually you get some sort of reason going, and the tear gas goes and the kids go home. One of the young men that we have on the team, Canadian fellow, was talking to the soldiers, and down along the road he could see this young Palestinian lad, maybe 12, 13, 14, who was picking up a rock and wanted to aim it. The bigger kids want to throw rocks at the soldiers. They want the soldiers out. And this is the way they see of getting them out. We know that it's futile, and we're desperately trying to dissuade them all the time. Anyway, the kid has the rock. He's looking around the corner of the building, but he can't get a good line on the soldier because the CPT member, Greg, is in the way. So he's going like this to Greg, and Greg is seeing him, and he stands right in front of the soldier. When the soldier moved, he stood in front of him. And every time the soldier moved, he stood dead in front of the soldier. So in a sense, very really, he blocked any possibility of this young fella throwing a stone. And they're big at the soldier. The kid eventually drops the thing and goes home because it's going nowhere. So that prevented probably a much larger event. Had he not done that, had the kid thrown the rock and had it hit the soldier, it's quite possible he would have fired. Not necessarily live ammunition, rubber bullets, but they can be really, really damaging. A lot of kids with damaged legs, knee joints, from being hit with rubber bullets. Rubber bullets. You now hit the kid now goes down on the ground. People come out to find out what's happened, see him pick up more rocks, throw more rocks. More soldiers will come. There may be 2 there now. There'll be 4 and then 6 and then 8. And the whole thing escalates into what we call a clash. When you've really got 2 sides going at it, it's a clash. And so just by blocking that one child, in a sense, you can't tell. You never know how it would have turned out, but quite possibly that prevented, a much larger incident. In the last few days, we've had to do a lot of assisting people who are very hungry because Hebron has now been totally closed for 5 days, not only the old city, but H1, which is the 2/3 of the city, which is supposedly under Palestinian control. even we were saying last year when it was under Palestinian control, the helicopter gunships can come in, and they did. They shot a car on the main street to kill someone they had labeled a terrorist, a militant, and they also killed 2 children then on the sidewalk, a 13-year-old and a 3-year-old. But we say, how can this be Palestinian controlled if the helicopters can come in, they're over your head and can do whatever they do? It's not Palestinian controlled. I mean, it's written that way, it's drawn that way on the map, but it's not the way that it's functioning. So Palestinian controlled Hebron, H1 has been closed. The old city, which is where the CPT office and apartment is totally closed. So you have to come out of the old city to walk up through H1, which is more modern buildings, modern streets, keep walking, and hope you find the grocery store where the door is just cracked and the owner is willing to risk an awful lot by having that door open. And we did. A man put us onto it. I saw him carrying 4 bags of groceries. He had 2 little children with him, and I said, "Excuse me, we need food, milk, bread." And he pointed down the road, and we could see the door was, you can see that it's not quite, you have to look, it's not quite closed. So we walked down, and it's like, knock, knock. And the store owner opened it, he says, "Come in." We go in, and he bolts it then, because if the army jeep comes down, then the door isn't shut. They have him, generally they just say you have like 1 minute to close it. And we certainly didn't want to be found in there. And so we were buying food, buying milk mostly for people with babies. The Red Cross had called the night before saying they had calls from families who had babies and small children and no milk. So we had a list, and then we needed to get bread and other basics. We've done that for the last 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Every morning we have been going up and going to the bakery, in through the back of the bakery, and picking up the bread as it comes off the conveyor belt there. So basically, the last 3 days, what we have been doing is just basic humanitarian work, bringing food to people who have been stuck inside their houses 24 hours a day for 5 days and have no food left at all. The curfew normally is lifted after every 3rd or 4th day for anything between 2 to 4 hours so that people can go out and buy food, but that has not happened. We kept saying it's going to be, oh, it did. Yesterday, before I came, they lifted it from 8 p.m. till 11 in the old city. That's not going to allow anyone to buy food. What it will allow is for families to visit. This is Ramadan. They visit one another. They eat this. They're supposed to feast and eat this big meal. That was obviously not going to happen, but it did allow the visiting. From 8 until 11 in the old city. From 4 until 8 in H1, they lifted. But the Palestinians suffer then at the hands of the occupation, the army of occupation, and they also suffer because the settlers are very violent towards them. They're no longer, the market in which we live is closed off, and the soldiers tell us it's because all of this barbed wire and wire grating and concrete blocks are there because the Jewish settlers kept invading the market, turning over the stall, beating up little old men who had piles of cauliflower and eggplant there. I watched one young Jewish woman doing this. The settlers frighten the farmers off the land by shooting over their heads when they come to harvest. They don't want them to come and touch the land. If it's not worked for 3 or 4 years, it's considered abandoned land. And now if it's abandoned, they may take it. The Palestinians live, as I say, in fear of the settlers and the soldiers. In Hebron and in the old city, it's pretty terrible. I mean, I feel for the children, I feel for the women, I feel for the men actually, because all of their dignity is taken away from them. They're made to squat. They were squatting for hours, and this guy got up when I was going by yesterday. He's got up, he's rubbing his legs. They hurt, they ache. So, and the soldier came out and pointing the gun and saying, no, no, no. And I said, come on, I said, be human, let him stand up. His legs are aching. Let him stand up for a while. How can you do this? But they're all supposed to squat down. I'm sure that's because, in a sense, you have more control over people who are in that position than if they're standing up straight. Much of what goes on at Checkpoint is in contravention of international law. The soldiers don't know international law. They have no idea about the International Declaration of Human Rights and the Geneva Convention. Sometimes we ask, did anyone ever read you these? Did anyone ever show you these? Do you know what it contains? And I did ask one soldier one morning, one young man, he'd been detaining people for far too long. It was cold, it was damp, it wasn't raining, but it was damp and misty. I said, these people are freezing and shivering, and you've had them hours, and you must have checked their IDs by now. Don't you know about Geneva Convention? Don't you know about International Human Rights, Declaration on Human Rights? And he looks at me charmingly and he said, but Israel's law is higher than all this. He said, I said, I think you believe that, but that's not the case. He said, Israel's law is higher than everything, which of course allows him to do whatever he wants to do, mentally gets him into a place where he can be a little tyrant. And he may believe it, although I'm not sure. But so then we have to argue on humanitarian grounds for them to let people go who've been sitting out in the cold for hours and hours on end. And this last few days I've been arguing on behalf of children. I can do that very well. There were children against they line up the men who come out during curfew. They're coming out looking for bread, looking for food, looking for medicine in one case. And there were children there, and I go to the soldier and I say, you can't keep these children, they're under 12, I can tell they're under 12, and you cannot keep them. And he says, go away, and I say, no, I won't go away until the children can go away. So I'm here, and you must let them go. And we have this gentle argument backwards and forwards. And then he says, there's nothing I can do about it, meaning somebody else has given the orders. And I said, you can't keep them here. The Palestinians say to us that they can distinguish between the American government and American people. And I'm grateful for that, because they feel very much that the conflict is fueled by the USA because of the amount of aid that is given to Israel, which was, I don't know, in 98 it was 6.2 billion. I haven't tracked it much since then. It seems such an overwhelming number, I give up. That's all those zeros. That goes mostly in armaments and military aid, and we've got this strange agreement where we agree to replace every piece of weaponry, every piece of, I don't know what to call it. Every bullet that's shot is replaced. Every tank shell that's shot is replaced. That seems to me to be all, I find that so difficult to grasp. And I find it very, very uncomfortable is not a big enough word. I find it painful. I find it painful to think that we are supporting this sort of oppression with our tax dollars, and that I'm quite sure that a large number of people don't understand that or don't realize that that's the case. And part of the task then is to educate them so that they do understand that that's in fact what we're doing with our money. We're supplying, anyway, weapons, F-16s and M-16s, and the tanks I know are Israeli made. In fact, I'm learning more about weaponry than I ever wanted to know. People keep teaching me stuff. And then I say to myself, how much difference does that make? They all do the same amount of damage in the end when they hit the human body. So. But yes, it's mostly fueled. In fact, I've talked to Palestinians who think that the conflict is mostly fueled by the USA. And it's pretty well impossible to argue your way out of that one when you see the figures. The US government funds what it funds in Israel because, I think, or well, if you look at the Senate and the Congress, the people who are elected need, in fact, a Jewish vote very often to get them to keep their seat. One of our CPT members writes and visits her congressperson regularly when she's home. She sends all her mail and her email so that this woman will know what's going on. She asks for an interview and never gets one. She is interviewed by an aide, and she says to the aide, you must have read all this. You must understand what's going on. You've read my request that they raise the question about finance. And the aide says, yes, but there's nothing she can do about it. If she does, she will lose her seat. She won't be voted in again because a large part of her constituency is Jewish. A tremendous amount of Jewish money goes into lobbying. And if you look at the media, it looks to me like there's a hefty bias in favor of Israel and Israel's policies, and that the Palestinian story is not told and nor is it understood. Nobody understands that the violence of the occupation is the basic foundational violence, and then all of these things come afterwards on top of it.